So this is a video on how to dismantle a royal cone winder. You'll notice this is my enhanced one that I've replaced the inner part, which goes from the outside through the machine and out the back. So what you start with doing with this is you remove the thing that attaches this part to the center part here. There originally was a clip which I promptly misplaced. So what I've done, because this vertical post here has a notch, I just used a split ring, which looks like a tiny key ring, and I just basically had it seat down on top of this washer to hold this unit here on. So the first thing I will do on mine is to remove what's holding this part together. On any other one out there, you'll just have that clip. On anyone out there that you have that clip, it has a Pac-Man shape. So all you need to do is either get needle nose pliers or pliers that can bend wire into circles, or just basically anything with 2 points, even just kind of like this here. And with that clamp, you'll want to stick the ends kind of in those two Pac-Man type beak parts and then push it open gently, and it'll come off the top of that peg. So what I'll do on mine is I'll just simply release the spring. Oop, it's promptly shot on over to my little bucket I've got here, so I'm okay with that. So now that it's no longer trapped, make sure you keep all your parts and you keep them safe. This part here is the cone. Straightforward. There's a little washer that sat on there, so put that aside. Make sure you don't lose any of these parts. So of course this is where the yarn cone sits on, and that you can put aside. Now this isn't a very important gear, as this is one of 2 parts that connect inside the machine when you're turning it to create the whole unit to turn itself. So I'll put that aside. So this is what we're left with. I'm not sure you saw that there, but this is tension mounted, and it's designed to be firm against that plastic part that we took off. So it's just going to flop around. So then you can see this is the second cogwheel. So basically you have a crank that goes from the outside through the machine, and then it's attached basically here. This is the whole important part of the machine, and then it comes out the back. The usual cone winder actually is attached here with a clamp, and it doesn't go any further, that rod. So that's how that one ends. So mine is just, of course, a revised and replaced part, but that's what that looks like. So at this point, there's nothing else you can do from this. So what you want to do is you want to turn it over. And it actually has 3 screws. One here, and one here. So using your Phillips, and of course you want to just take those screws out. Try not to strip them. If you hear any interesting noise, I apologize. It's one of my 2 kitty cats being very active. So there's the second screw in a minute. This is what it looks like, nothing special. Make sure you try not to lose any of your parts. This is that 3rd screw. So one of the main difficulties with this unit, this design, is what basically makes this whole machine work is the fact that the centralized part inside is crimped to the housing. So it's attached permanently to the housing. And so what that means is that when you're working to get inside the machine, without unattaching the main part from the inside component, it's going to be impossible to open this up completely. You can only open it up partly. So reviewing what we've got here now is we've taken the 3 screws out, and that's pretty much it. So now basically what you'll only have the ability to do is to kind of offset it and kind of sneak a peek inside. And again, it's because this crimp here on the bottom, this crimp here, and this crimp on the other side are basically giving the whole unit a foundation mount that allows this to be secure, which is what it needs for all the tension that applies to this. So I don't know if you can fully see that there. So what I've done on this cone winder is I have reinforced the part where the crank is with just some washers to kind of protect wear and tear. They're just round, flat center things, because plastic, of course, wears sooner than metal. That's just to protect, so that'll pop off as soon as it gets out of alignment. The other thing I did here is I created this hole in the back that isn't locked in the housing, that it goes right to the seam, so that one can still work on the inside of the machine when you've added this extra long part, and that, of course, that extra long part comes out the back. Then, of course, the reason why that is there is this allows you to attach something that rotates and attaches to here, that you could activate the machine automatically, like with a drill or something, to not have to hand crank yarn. So this is about as far as you're going to get. So this itself doesn't get super easy. However, it is all manageable depending how determined or stubborn you are. So we're actually done with the screwdriver. So just as a review, this part here, this is a clamp that's center mounted inside. It doesn't make the components open a bit more or a bit less. That's pretty much it, because these parts are separate than this clamshell part. So what we need to do now is we need to, the main important parts of this unit, as I've upgraded it to, is, so as I was saying, this is the main part of the machine. This is the part that holds this stable. It's its foundation, I'm going to call it from now on. It's the whole meaning of life here. Without this, everything would go wonky. So this is the meaning of life, as I like to now call it. I have a washer here, and I have it's actually one of those friction grip plastic inside 1/4 inch nut, because this is a 1/4 inch rod that's threaded from the hardware store. So basically I'm protecting the main foundation with a washer and a kind of a nut that won't undo itself easily, so it won't undo through vibration, which a regular one would. And then you see on the other side of the foundation, you see a washer, which ended up not being needed because there is no contact between the nut and that part there. But actually then you have this, you probably can't see it very well, another nut with that plastic inner part that's like a locking nut. It's identical, these two components, these 1/4 inch, only because this is a 1/4 inch thread. This is what we've used, these 1/4 inch nut, 1/4 inch nut, and they are the plastic locking ones. But on the other side of this one here, which is the more important one, is a washer, actually 2 washers, and then the plastic gear. Now this plastic gear is essential because it's actually firmly attached to the rod. And by moving the rod, you would move the cone, and everything would wind, because this is what it's all based on. So initially the issue I had was how this is attached. It's actually quite simple and pretty ingenious actually. How it's attached initially wasn't secure, and it was wobbling, and wobbling means that the gear was sometimes connecting to this top important gear and sometimes not, and you need to always make sure that it's touching. So what I did was I opened this up. So the next step from here, sorry for being such a Gabby, if I didn't have this not locking here and this not locking there, would be to maneuver it in such a way that I could back the white cog or gear a little bit off and then I could take things apart. So what I'm saying here is this white gear is actually a flat, imagine a flat wheel. And on the back side of the flat wheel, on the inner circle where it's on the post, there is a slot. And on the post itself, there's a hole with the pin that goes through. So how it's constructed is that post that's in this part of it here has that hole. It has a tiny pin in it, and the pin connects to the slot on the back of this gear. And then I've locked it into place. So that's how we're getting complete parallel use with moving this and having it move with it. It's locked to the pin. So what we need to do at this point, because of how I now have it, is I need to undo this nut and then undo the nut inside. Initially, I thought it was important also to do these two nuts that are in here that you can't fully see, but these ones actually ended up not being used in any way. And by how this all fits together, kind of like the puzzle, I couldn't try it without going for broke. What I mean to say is, in order for things to line up, before you tighten them up, you have to put them all in the order you're going to be in regards to threading in the machine. So you basically take your crank wheel and you thread it through the bottom, and then you come through, and then you will thread the white cog on the gear ring, and then it'll just be loose, but make sure it's facing the right way, which is towards the back of the unit. And then you will thread your washers, which will help further stabilize that white cog from being wavering around, that it'll be exactly 90 degrees on the post or the crank wheel. So those are the washers, and then you have your locking nut, and then it's just going through the center foundation, and then a washer and a locking nut. And that's all you really need. But in order to get to these things, in order to make them work, they have to all be threaded because of how it is all attached. You'll see what I mean as we go. So at this point, without talking too much, apologies, I need to undo this guy, which is that locking 1/4 inch, and undo that one that's inside. These are the two essentials, and then of course get rid of the two I put in the back, which you won't see in the future because they ended up not being needed. But without being able to, if I just leave it there, I won't be able to undo the post because it's actually sitting all together in this hole. So everything is threaded together. So what I'll do now then is I am going to undo the locking nut that's in there. In order to do that, one good way is anything long that can lock. Ideally, I would use wrench, not a crescent wrench, actually a crescent wrench, but one that doesn't adjust because they're fatter. But what I can do is just lock it with the pliers in my hand and just turn the crank, because that'll undo it. But I only have so much movement inside in regards to scooching them along the post. So what you can't see right now is I'm turning the left hand, and the crank wheel is kind of sliding to the left. And as it does that, the components inside are moving around. So I actually need to also ensure that I'm moving these ones in here. So I'm just going to scooch my fingers in first. It's not very easy on your fingers, I warn you now. But you can move things around by not letting it win. So I'm also going to use my needle nose pliers to kind of scooch into these useless nuts that are inside. I am just going to take them separately, oops, and try to just move them to the right towards the end of the post so I can unthread them from the unit. You're not going to see a buttload here. Apologies. But by keeping them not touching each other inside, it makes them almost finger movable. So in order to make the pin undo, I need to rotate the crank anti-clockwise. Right, that's right. And so you're going to stop suddenly when any of these components hit a wall inside. So what's happened is this has hit this and has said no more movement. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure that's it. Yep. Put my fingers in and just untwirl. I'm moving the inner components to the right so I can scooch it off. It certainly is a huge hassle in which to take it apart, but looking at the alternative things, there's harder things. Cats are chasing each other. All right. So you won't see a lot of movement while everything is done in such small amounts. There we go. I don't know if you can see that there. Cats. And you just kind of... I'm going to use the needle nose again to grab the two ineffective ones that I thought I needed before. Just ignore the cats. You can hear the troublemaker. The younger one's wearing a bell. Alright. It actually makes it quite convenient that it's on a crank because you can just grab it inside and turn it. It's actually pretty smart. And because I have the locking style, it's both a blessing and a curse. Curse because I can't easily finger undo it. But on the other side of it, it also means it won't vibrate undone. So I can't move that with my own fingers. But I have one in there that currently doesn't have that. So I can't even move that with my own fingers. Alright, so there we go. This one on the left side of the foundation, as you see it in the picture, if you can see this at all, actually is very close. So I'm just going to rotate this. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that now. Looking at the top of it, you'll note the white gear is now way to the left. So what we can do here is I can scooch the gear a bit more to the right, as I have now. And let's see if that pin is exposed. Is that pin exposed yet? Yeah, okay, the pin has been exposed. And you probably won't see it there. So what has happened now is the pin is dropped inside of the unit, which is perfectly fine. I will rescue that before things go too far. And now the gear is loose and sitting just threaded, just sitting on the crank wheel itself. So what we can do here is now we have a little more mobility inside. So this is how much mobility we have on the whole unit. But what we need to do, of course, is move everything to the left. So the next step is, now that we have full access down the top, is first of all, we could just try to take off this end one. I really do wish I had, I guess they are wrenches. Next thing for a future purchase. So I'm just securing the nut while I move it to the left. And so maybe I can just show you there. So everything remains in the order it is. It just needs to kind of work its way to the right. It's a bit of a pain, but I'll try not to say that too often. Ideally, once you set this up for good, you're good. But there you are. Another reason why you'd want to undo this unit to this extent, maybe not so much as undoing the inner parts like I am here, is that maybe you've accidentally trapped yarn inside and it's kind of trapped under the top cog, which is what I found had happened in the past. You could gently open and disengage and pull out that yarn that'll be all greasy. That's the other thing too. You're going to find the plastic components are coated usually in a type of grease to kind of just give them the excess maneuverability and less wear and tear with the parts. Of course, with a lot of friction, even plastic does heat up. So, yeah. All right, let's just try to get that locking one that's on the far left. Yeah. Apologies, I meant to pause it while I monkey around with all this, but I didn't also want you to miss anything. This will be a bit of a long video, but I'm just going to show you the dismantling part of it, because of course to put it together it's in reverse. Most persons won't be fully experiencing what I'm doing at this point here, because the actual unit before my modification is a very simple setup inside. The regular cone winder has a basic crank wheel. It has that pin that holds the vertical white cog. It has a simple pin on the end, or a locking mechanism here, and that's it. So the reason why mine's a little more complex is I changed my crank wheel completely, and in order to have the components be at the right areas to kind of mesh or feed into the cogwheel, etc., I needed to be able to lock them in place, and with the locking in place, that's what the nuts do, of course. So I'm getting there. I should have done it on a towel, less noise. So some people might look at this video and say, why would anybody go through this trouble? Now, if you find something you like and you can't pick it up at your neighborhood, why wouldn't you go through this trouble? I have a dream, which is probably more than a dream than ever going to be a reality, that this amazing yarn cone winder could be all in metal. That white cog could be in metal. That its counterpart, the base of the cone, could be in metal. And that maybe nothing else would need to be in metal. But by being in metal, it could take the torque. All right, so now we can do it from the top. So the end far right one is now off. Turn that baby, sorry. Turn this one around. So the end one on the foundation is no longer secure. So in the future, to reassemble this, you indeed only need to have the locking nut on either side of the foundation with the washer, the locking nut on the left side of the foundation with its own washer. This is just to secure the white cog, as the pin attachment to it makes it wobble if it doesn't have that kind of support to move around. All right. So the good news is, while you have this movement, is you can move it towards the middle and have fuller or more access to it. So what we want to do here, the foundation hasn't moved in any way. It's just the top of the clamshell. Sorry, it's bouncing so much. I don't want to make you feel sick. It's attached by a clamp to my chair beside me. I thought I could just quickly make this video. And as soon as I have it apart, I can show you the components. Please be patient with me. Alright. I had hoped to have more time to do this, but as you can see, it's moving more to the left. But tomorrow I have to work very, very early, and I won't have time to do it in the morning and then send what I want to send out at the post after work. So I'm going to go to the post office after work, from work. Life has got so many errands sometimes. All right, almost there. So I am on the locking nut to the left of the foundation, just before the white vertical cog, and I can feel it's tight now, so what's probably happening is, yes. And my cat Polly, come on, get off, go, go, go. Good girl. We have 2 cats. That was the slightly older one. All right. So what I need to do is I need to get to the locking unnecessary one. It's beside the regular one inside. So indeed, ignore this step because this one won't be here in the future. Some of it was a guess on how much support I needed, which I didn't really know exactly until I started assembling it. As you can see, it's not a 5-second solution to tighten these nuts from inside of the unit while you don't have full access. However, I bought extra components at the hardware store, so you don't have to worry too much about things being overworn and stripped, because you can just trade them out. Now, of course, this left side is very limited access. Kind of feels like I'm building a ship in a bottle. So I certainly appreciate these small component areas. So we're almost completely off. Almost. Of course, I can't. Almost. So let's see what we have here. So that one needs to move. White dial is just sitting on it, and that one needs to move. So I found these locking ones really can't get in here. So I'm just using the needle nose to kind of just grab it, and because they are the plastic locking ones. There we go. I've got it secured, and there we go, working it to the right. So as you can see, my crank wheel's gotten so much longer as we move the nuts to the right. Now, had I just clamped this to the table, it might have been a little bit easier, but also it might not, because it means my access would have to be level to the table. This table we're working on is a wonderful table from my boyfriend's family's past. Needs a little TLC actually, but in the meantime, it doesn't have a very square edge, which would be more secure with using a clamp. Excuse me. Which is the other reason why I'm not clamped to it. All right, so I've moved that to the left. As soon as I can scooch it off the end, we'll be good. Can I? Oh, I could kinda, almost. So I don't know if you can see that there. It's almost. I'll move it back so we have access, and maybe grab the locking one on the left side of the. There we go. Left side snug. Let's grab the one on the right of the gear. So what you're seeing here now is the tiny pinhole that the white gear sits in when the pin is in place, and it's then kind of snugged up to a nut, and then you have a firm 90 degrees and it doesn't waver, and that way the gears are all connected when you turn it. Pretty ingenious. All right, that washer's gonna fall off. There we go. right, so let's undo the right one still. A bit more. People upstairs are noisy. And I apologize if all you can hear is my breathing on this video. Hopefully you can hear me talk. I do have asthma and sometimes it predominates the sounds. There we go. All right, so everything is loosened up. Now here's the next nut. Good. See, now what happens is because those two useless ones that you still can't see are inside, I cannot pull the rod directly out just yet. What I am going to do is see if I can wiggle off the white. It's not quite at the right space for it. Can I do that yet? No, not quite. All right, and because I've jumped the gun a bit. All right. So the foundation itself, as this vertical part inside, isn't one where my rod threads into it. It's actually just sitting in it. So I don't have to be concerned about not having any attachment there. And the reason why it's not attached or threaded into the foundation is you're using a crank. If you have a threaded rod and it's attached to your foundation, you're going to turn it. It's going to be tight and you're going to be moving your rod all over the place. So it was kind of important that it freely moves, but not so much that it isn't restricted in moving around to disengage. All right, the other thing I had noticed is the white vertical gear, the cog, it's all plastic, and the inner part of it where it touched the rod could potentially break, shatter, and or just become uneven. And as it turned out, I had a tiny metal bead come by accident in one of my last split ring orders from eBay, and it just happened to fit inside that gear just perfectly. Kind of just a sheath to kind of protect the plastic from any undue wear and tear. All right, so that's there. And that's there we go. All right. So this is the unneeded one. It'll make more sense in a minute. There, it's inside. And now we have the one that's not a locking one, so I can just, I'm flicking it so it undoes. I'm almost at the point of having it come off. This is the one I didn't need. It's all scratched up anyways. This is the other one. Very good. It's tight. Okay, so let me just move the parts out of the way. And we'll line them up like they're in the machine so you can see it. So at this point, as I said before, is you really don't have full access to the top and bottom separately. So there's a white cogwheel floating around wanting out. So I just kind of work it until the cogwheel comes out. This isn't needed. So there's the cogwheel. I reinforced it when I saw there was a crack on it with some Gorilla Crazy Glue, which is pretty awesome crazy glue. And where's my pin? Good. Maybe the pin hits the floor. That's always a joy. So make sure you work in a well-lit place. If anything goes away, possibly you'll find it again. Let me just see if I can see the pin or anything inside. Okay, there's not a lot in it. I mean, it's all basic shell. But I don't think you'll be able to see a lot in there. There's the foundation that holds this post. There you go. All right. So this is the unit that the crank comes into. So when reassembling this, it is important. I wonder where that pin went. Well, that's okay. I can make another one if I need to. All right, so what we do here is my fingers hurt from doing that. Don't be a sumo wrestler when you're working with such small places. Okay, so lining the machine up. That pin should be in there. I haven't noticed it. There it is. Awesome. Good. Good to be stubborn. All right, so if you were to use this because you saw that it was complete, you have the clamp here. You clamp it on the table. It sits like this. So how this works is you have your crank, whether it be the original one. Oh, that is very heavy. Let me just get the spray. Flying. There it is. Good. Okay. So the original machine, I took the winder handle off it, so don't worry about that. So for clarity, this basic unit, the premise is a hole the pin sits in, and there is, I have black ink on it, sorry. There's a slot here, so you have it together and you're almost all completely done. Oh, does it not easily fit? Okay, there. Then you put the pin in when it's all together, but not finished with the screws. Then inside the machine, because of course you have to work from inside the bottle, you put the pin in and then you engage it with those slots on the pin, and then you want to lock it into place. So when you lock it into place, you actually don't do it the same way I did it. In regards to the machine, then you have the foundation, which is that inner part that's attached to this. You have it a washer and a clamping pin, and basically it can't go any further. And when it's together on the unit, it doesn't let it move because it can't pull back. It's attached on the end. And it can't go forward because it's connecting to the gear. If that makes any sense. So there we go. So what we do with my upgraded one, the idea is kind of the same. I wanted something longer. So here is the 1/4 inch pipe or rod that I actually ended up using part of the building to bend metal components that didn't get hurt in any way, so that I could bend like the handle. This is the handle, it'll crank. So basically what I did is I determined where that hole for the pin needed to be. And I gave myself extra room so it wasn't too short. And then at this point, so let's put it together like we were going to use it. In order to do anything with the machine, you have to make sure you put the vertical wheel back in. As I said, that I have reinforced it with this metal tube just to kind of protect the inside plastic, because plastic can shard. Disregard the Gorilla Glue. I feel it makes it extra strong. Make sure you never get any Gorilla Glue in the gear, because that's important. Yeah, so there it is. It disregards the Jiffy marker on the back. So in order to okay, let's just say we're wanting to put it back together now. It's important to us to do that. And somehow we will, or I will, not right today. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to fish it back through, opening it a bit and scooching it in and making sure that it is oriented gears to the left, to the back of the unit. Okay, so then it'll be inside the machine. Pretend it's inside the machine. Okay, and then there's a hole here on the red part that is threaded, or not threaded, but I can't come from the top and go in. You have to put it all the way through that hole. So you put it through that hole, and then what you'll do is you won't put the pin in yet. You'll just leave that. And then you'll put your white gear on it. And it's just going to sit loose. And then you're going to put a washer another washer, whatever it takes, that when the unit is assembled, that it's not going to wiggle and jiggle. Even with a pin holding that in, it will wiggle and jiggle without having some reinforced kind of like something to lean against it. So I'll just pretend it's inside the machine. So I figured because there's a small raised edge there, just use whatever washers kind of work for you. I wanted maximum coverage, so I found washers that would fit just perfectly. And that's not it, of course. I think actually this is what goes on there. So yeah, so what I did was I just used one of these. Because the white ring is completely even on my gear, I just wanted something to be stable. And then I used one of these nylon inside, so there's some plastic inside the thread and a regular thread here, and it just makes it harder to turn. It doesn't matter if you do it this way or this way, but I felt because this is a rounded side and this is a flat side, that it made more security to be tight. So inside the machine, you will turn this on the unit, however it gets in there with your little pliers and whatever. So it sits before the pinhole. So inside the machine, you're just kind of threading everything up, getting everything ready to work. So we'll just pretend that it's threaded on the machine. Excuse me here. So then you don't need to do anything, because the next step would be to thread it through the foundation, which has that hole. That hole does not thread onto the threads of the rod, it just sits on it. And then on the other side of the foundation, we don't want it to go any further. So in order to stop it from going any further, we put a washer just to kind of give it some protection to stop it from undoing it. So there's the foundation there. Imagine it's inside the machine. And then we want to have another one of those fancy pants locking metal and plastic, so it's harder to accidentally vibrate off, and work that way down on it so that the foundation is there. So now when you have it on the machine like that and it's inside, of course at first it's going to be way the bazing out here. So, you know, you turn the crank and move the components along until it's at the right density of the distance. And then at that point, when it's the time that the plastic gear is about where the pinhole is, then making sure you haven't tightened up the locking one too much. What you need to do is you're going to take anything you can to get that little pin in there. What I have, being someone who goes to swap meets and those kinds of things, secondhand places, and also being a dental person, but I didn't get it from a dental office. This is called a Hemostat. This is an extra long one, and I just happened to get a bunch for craft eons ago. They were like, I don't know, $5 each or $4 each, whatever. Basically, this is something with jaws, and it's like tweezers. And what it allows me to do with, instead of using my fat fingers, it allows me to take my pin, which I created, and put it in the pinhole, which will be inside the clam shell of the machine. So I'll put the pin in, hold it there, and then push the plastic into place so that the little slots of the back will engage. And then I will maneuver the washer so it's firm, and then that special tightening so it's firm inside, and then it won't wiggle anymore. It'll be firm, it'll be one part, just one unit. And then of course just tighten everything else, and then put it back together and tighten the screws, and that's pretty much it. So I know that sounded like a lot of information, but it's actually pretty simple. So make sure that you are not misplacing any of your components. You might ask, how did I know what pin size to use? Well, I looked at the density or the thickness of the 1/4 inch rod, and I wanted to, of course, not weaken it too much by ramming a huge hole in the middle of it. So what I did is I actually ended up going on Amazon and buying a bunch of $10 billion pieces of high quality drill bits, excuse me, drilling a hole slowly because these finer ones actually break quite easy. And this one didn't break at all. It actually broke towards the end. So I don't know if you can see that there, it's through. The pin is actually the broken drill bit. So I just measured it and then used my Dremel sanding tool and kind of just made it nice into a pin because it fits perfectly. That's the hole that I drilled. You want to make sure that pin won't fall out. Of course, once it's locked with the plastic gear and the slots, it doesn't fall off. It's locked in place. So that's pretty much it. I hope I didn't lose you or bore you or that you're not sleeping, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And that's pretty much dismantling a cone winder. Hopefully my plans for this will involve perhaps a stronger manufacturing of this gearing because at high torque or use of something like a drill, it's too much the possibility of slippage and damaging this contact and this contact. I think we can get away with using still a plastic direction barrel that moves the yarn up and down on your cone to evenly distribute it. I think, and I don't really know everything, it's just how I feel. So I feel the easiest part to remanufacture would be these two. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, thank you for your time. I hope you are successful at everything you do. And that's it. Signing off. Thank you.